I did not decide to speak because I wanted peace. I decided to speak because what I saw at the beginning of certain years still disturbs me even now. There are people listening to me whose lives were scheduled for destruction before January 3rd of a particular year. Not because they were careless, not because they sinned, but because their names appeared on lists. Lists drawn up long before fireworks ended and church crossover services closed. You see, while many people are celebrating the new year with noise, food, and wishes, witchcraft does not celebrate. We prepare. The beginning of a year is not a date to us, it is a gate. And whoever controls what happens at that gate often controls how the entire year flows. I was there. I sat in meetings where we did not ask, will this person fall this year? We asked, when? January was always our favorite month. February was strategic. March was enforcement. But there were certain people, few, but unforgettable, whose names kept coming back to the table with the same report. The plans are not holding. The arrows are returning. Monitoring is blocked. The calendar is sealed. At first, we thought it was coincidence. Then we thought it was senior protection, maybe ancestral interference, but no. It was something far more dangerous to us. Psalms. Not random psalms. Not occasional reading. Not emotional recitation. These people had entered the year armed. What they read at the beginning of the year built structures in the spirit realm that we could not penetrate, no matter how many months passed. Some read for 21 days, some for 30 days, some for 40 days, midnight after midnight, morning after morning. And by the time we realized what had happened, the year was already shaped. I want you to understand something clearly before I go further. Witchcraft does not fight people. It fights patterns, timings, and foundations. And the Psalms these people read at the beginning of the year became foundations we could not uproot. What I am about to tell you is not theory. It is not church motivation. It is the reason some of our most carefully planned attacks failed repeatedly for an entire year. My name is Ruth Adola. I was not a field witch who only attacked randomly. I worked in spiritual intelligence and outcome tracking. My assignment was simple: observe, monitor, report why things worked or why they failed. So when an assignment failed once, it was ignored. When it failed twice, it was reviewed. When it failed 3 times across different months, it became a case study. And one case changed everything I thought I knew. There was a man who sealed his year in January. His name was Daniel Okor. He lived in Enugu, Nigeria. A quiet man, banker, married, no loud ministry, no prophetic reputation. He was listed for financial collapse. The instruction was clear. Drain his income by May. Introduce unexpected debt by August. Break his marriage by November. January was when the door was supposed to be opened. We monitored him closely. What we saw confused us. From January 2nd to January 31st, Daniel woke up every morning between 4:30 a.m. and 5:30 a.m. No phone, no music, no distractions. He read Psalms aloud, not one, not two. He followed a strange, consistent pattern. Psalm 1, Psalm 5, Psalm 24, Psalm 91, Psalm 121. Every single morning for 30 days. He did not pray long prayers. He read slowly, clearly, sometimes repeatedly. By the 10th day, our monitoring mirrors started showing static. By the 14th day, we could no longer access his financial timelines. By the 21st day, something had formed. We called it a word canopy. By the 30th day, his year was sealed. When we tried to introduce laws in March, money came from unexpected places. When we steered conflict in June, peace swallowed it. When we attempted marital division in October, conversations we planted into their lives turned into reconciliation. Every report ended the same way. The foundation of the year is fortified. We were angry, but it was not the only case. There was a woman who used 21 days to disrupt an entire coven. Her name was Amaka Moy. She lived in Asaba Delta State. She had been under attack for 8 years. So we expected an easy continuation. But in January of that year, she did something new. From January 1st to January 21st, she read Psalm 27, Psalm 35, Psalm 64, Psalm 109 at midnight, every night, sometimes crying, sometimes angry, sometimes exhausted, but consistent. On the 7th night, one of our junior witches reported sickness after monitoring her. On the 14th night, an altar candle refused to light. On the 21st night, the entire assignment collapsed. What shocked us was this. The Psalms didn't just defend her. They disrupted our coordination. Our dreams became disorganized. Instructions conflicted. Timings failed. For the rest of that year, every attempt against her returned confusion to us. Her year had been programmed in advance. By April, we had an emergency meeting, and the conclusion was terrifying. People who structure the beginning of their year with psalms are not reacting to attacks, they are preventing permissions. Witchcraft requires legal access. Those psalms, read early, consistently, intentionally, removed access before the year unfolded. That is why attacks kept failing months later, even when they were well planned. I am speaking because many of you wait until things go wrong before you pray. But the people we could not defeat prayed before anything went wrong. They shaped the year while it was still soft. By the middle of that year, we stopped asking if psalms were involved. The questions became, which psalms did they read? And when did they start? Because we noticed something terrifying. If a person completed a serious psalm cycle in January, then even if they stopped reading by February or March, the effects remained active till December. It meant only one thing. The beginning of the year is not just a season, it is a spiritual womb. WOMB. And whatever is planted there matures, whether you keep watching it or not. There was a man who used 40 days and broke a 7-year pattern. His name was Joseph Mensah, a Ghanaian man who lived in Ibadan, Oyo State. For 7 years, his life followed the same pattern. January to March, hope. April to June, struggle. July to September, loss. October to December, survival. We called it a cycle loop. Our assignment was simple: maintain the loop. But January of that year, Joseph did something that alarmed us. From January 1st to February 9th, 40 full days, he read Psalms. Not randomly. Every day had structure. Morning 5 a.m., Psalm 1, Psalm 23. Afternoon 12 p.m., Psalm 35. Midnight, Psalm 91, Psalm 124, Psalm 124. He didn't fast every day. He didn't shout. He didn't even attend many programs, but he was consistent. By day 12, the loop began to wobble. By day 21, timelines no longer aligned. By day 33, we lost historical access. On day 40, something happened that forced an emergency report. The cycle collapsed. That year, his April brought opportunities. His July brought promotion. His October brought property ownership. Every attempt to reintroduce laws bounced back violently. One junior witch lost her voice after attempting midnight monitoring. Another reported seeing closed doors with inscriptions of psalm verses. We were furious, but worse was coming. There was a woman who didn't know she was protected. This one disturbed me deeply. Her name was Evelyn Kata. She lived in Houston, Texas. She was not intense spiritually. She wasn't even aware of witchcraft mechanics. She simply had a tradition her grandmother taught her. Every January for 21 days, she read Psalm 91, Psalm 121, Psalm 127. That was it. No fasting, no midnight alarms, just every morning before work. She didn't know she was being monitored, but we knew. She was marked for sudden illness, job termination, emotional breakdown. January was our entry point. But each time we approached, it felt like walking into resistance we didn't understand. By February, attacks began failing. By May, monitoring stopped completely. By September, her life became quietly successful. The worst part, she never prayed against witches. Yet, the psalms she read created an atmosphere we couldn't survive in. That's when we learned a painful truth. You don't need to know about witchcraft to defeat it. You just need to align with spiritual laws early. Let me explain what we knew, but never wanted believers to learn. In witchcraft, January is a legal month. Whatever is established then sets permissions, determines access, programs resistance of vulnerability. When someone reads Psalms intentionally at the start of the year, they do three things. One, they occupy their calendar spiritually. Two, they pre-answer attacks before they are sent. Three, they frustrate monitoring for the entire year. That is why attacks planned for August failed. That is why arrows sent in November returned. The foundation had already been laid. There was the case of a man we tried to break through dreams. There was the case of a man we tried to break through dreams. His name was Samuel Adebayo. Lives in Akure, Ondo State. We failed in the physical, so we moved to dreams. But Samuel had read Psalms every midnight for 30 days in January. Psalm 3, Psalm 4, Psalm 91. By the time dream attacks began in June, something shocking happened. Instead of fear, he woke up singing. Instead of confusion, he gained clarity. Our dreams became chaotic. His became instructive. One witch reported, "It feels like his nights are guarded," and that was the problem. By October, anger filled the coven. We had planned detailed setbacks. We had invested time, rituals, sacrifices, but the reports kept coming back the same. The door is shut, access denied, foundation fortified. Some witches accused others of incompetence, some accused betrayal. But the truth was simpler. We were fighting people whose years had already been decided. What finally broke me was this. The final case that broke me involved a woman who should not have survived that year, but she did, and she flourished because of what she read in January. That story, that one deserves its own pace. The psalm structures that decide a year. By the time that year crossed into August, something had shifted permanently inside me. I was no longer shocked that attacks failed. I was disturbed by how predictable the failures had become. Once I saw the pattern, I could tell by February who would finish the year strong and who would struggle, regardless of effort, fasting, or prayer later. And the difference almost always came back to what happened at the beginning. Let me tell you what Psalms actually do in the spirit realm. Believers think Psalms are poems. We knew better. In witchcraft, Psalms are classified as ancient spiritual legal documents. When read with timing, with consistency, as spiritual transition points, they do not behave like normal prayers. They construct invisible systems. Let me explain it the way we understood it. 1. Psalms of foundation. They shape the year. These are psalms that don't fight battles. They define environment. People who read this early didn't just escape attacks. They changed the terrain. Examples of psalms we feared most: Psalm 1, Psalm 24, Psalm 27, Psalm 33. When these were read repeatedly in January, especially for 21 or 30 days, they formed what we called a righteous perimeter. Once this perimeter was established, any plan that contradicted it lost legitimacy. That was why some attacks never even activated. There was the case of a business that couldn't collapse. His name was Tunde Balogun, based in Abeokuta, Ogun State. Our assignment was not to attack him directly. It was to collapse his business quietly. No sickness, no scandal, just gradual loss. But Tunde did something simple. From January 1st to January 21st, every morning before opening his shop, he read Psalm 1, Psalm 112, Psalm 128. That was all. Yet by March, our projections began failing. Customers returned, debts cleared, contracts appeared unexpectedly. By July, his business has expanded. The report came back with a phrase I had never seen before: economic resistance detected. The Psalms had programmed prosperity pattern into his year. I say the Psalms had programmed prosperity patterns into his year. 2. Psalms of war. They frustrate mid-year attacks. These psalms were not always read in January, but when they were, we suffered badly. Examples: Psalm 35, Psalm 64, Psalm 109, Psalm 140. When someone combined foundation psalms with war psalms early in the year, it became almost impossible to attack them later. There was the case of an attack that backfired. Her name was Ngozi Eze, living in Owerri, Imo State. She had a history of loss. But that January, she did something different. For 40 days, she read morning, Psalm 27, afternoon, Psalm 35, midnight, Psalm 91. No fasting, just reading every day. By June, we launched a coordinated attack involving dreams, workplace manipulation, health pressure, Instead of breaking her, the attack reversed. One witch had a car accident, another fell ill mysteriously, a third resigned from the coven. Our conclusion was blunt. The year had teeth. 3. Psalms of closure. They shut doors permanently. These psalms don't fight witches. They earn permissions. Examples: Psalm 91, Psalm 121, Psalm 124, Psalm 125. When read consistently at the beginning of the year, they shut down monitoring, dream entry, spiritual tracking. There was the case of a woman we couldn't see at all. Her name was Margaret Osei, based in Kumasi, Ghana. From January 1st to January 30th, she read Psalm 91, Psalm 121. That was all. By February, we could no longer locate her spiritually. Her name appeared blurred, her image distorted. One witch screamed during monitoring and said, "She is covered. I can't see her days." That sentence haunted me. The mistake that weakened one man's year. Not every story ended well. One man did everything right in January, then undid it in March. His name was Peter Collins, living in London, UK. He read Psalms for 21 days at the start of the year, but in March, he abandoned everything. No reading, no consistency, no awareness. Gradually, cracks appeared. The foundation held, but maintenance failed. That is when we learned something crucial. Some psalms establish structure, others maintain it. When maintenance psalms are ignored for too long, access slowly returns. What finally shattered my loyalty? There was one last assignment. A woman whose death was scheduled. She read Psalms in January and she lived. Not just lived, she flourished. When the final report came back, it said, "Assignment aborted, yea, inaccessible." That was the night I stopped participating. By this point, you need to understand something clearly. That is the combinations we feared most. Witchcraft is not afraid of random prayer. It is afraid of order. It is afraid of sequence. It is afraid of early positioning. Once a believer understands how to combine psalms at the beginning of a year, the year stops being reactive and becomes pre-decided. This is where many of our strongest plans collapsed. In the coven, we eventually identified 3 psalm structures that consistently destroyed our work when used from January. We gave them internal names, not out of respect, but out of fear. Combination 1, the gate seal. This combination was deadly when used in the first 21 days of the year. It involved Psalm 24, Psalm 91, Psalm 121. People who used this combination didn't just get protected, they sealed their entrances, dreams, travel, opportunities, relationships. Every gate became guarded. There was the year that refused entry. His name was Isaac Omondi, living in Nairobi, Kenya. From January 1st to January 21st, every midnight, Isaac read Psalm 24 twice, Psalm 91, Psalm 121, nothing else. By the end of January, our monitoring failed completely. By April, when we tried to attack through travel mishaps, flights were delayed in his favor. When we tried workplace sabotage in August, management unexpectedly promoted him. The report was clear. All access points sealed. Combination 2. The foundation plus war loop. This was the most dangerous. It required foundation psalms in the morning, war psalms at midnight. When done for 30 days, the results were brutal for us. The psalms involved were usually morning, Psalm 1, Psalm 23, midnight, Psalm 35, Psalm 64. There was the case of the attack that returned multiplied. Her name was Zinab Bello, based in Ilorin, Kwara State. She was targeted for shame, but from January 1st to January 30th, she followed this pattern daily. 5 a.m. Psalm 1, Psalm 23, 12 a.m. Psalm 35, Psalm 64. No fasting, just consistency. By June, when we attacked, the attack didn't just fail, it returned. False witnesses were exposed. Lies collapsed publicly. Those involved turned against one another. One witch confessed later. It felt like her year was fighting back. Combination 3. The irreversible sale. This one terrified senior witches. It involved 40 days. Those who completed it were almost impossible to touch for the rest of the year and sometimes longer. The Psalms, Psalm 27, Psalm 91, Psalm 124, read morning, midnight for 40 days starting January 1st. There was the case of a man who sealed a decade. His name was Michael Turner, living in Birmingham, UK. Michael was tired. He decided that if he was going to fight, he would fight once and thoroughly. From January 1st to February 9th, he read morning, Psalm 27, midnight, Psalm 91, Psalm 124. He didn't miss a day. By March, his life changed direction. By July, his financial status shifted. By December, he testified openly. But what frightened us was not just that year. For 3 years after, attempts against him failed repeatedly. We wrote in our final report, long-term calendar alteration detected. Why midnight matters? Let me say this plainly. Midnight is not magical, it is transitional. It is when days hand over authority. When psalms are read at midnight, especially at the beginning of a year, they intercept authority before it settles. That is why midnight psalms accelerate results. Night monitoring falls. Dreams reverse. We hated midnight readers. We hated midnight readers. The one thing that made witches angry. Do you know what frustrates us the most? These people did not shout. They did not threaten witches. They did not even know what they were stopping. They simply read consistently. And consistency is poison to witchcraft. Why some people still fail after January? There was one mistake that ruined everything for a few people. They treated Psalms like a ritual, not a relationship. They rushed. They skipped days. They read without attention, and the structure weakened. We exploited gaps. That is why intention matters as much as timing. The moment I decided to leave, The last meeting I attended ended with these words: if believers ever learn this fully, many assignments will die unborn. That sentence stayed with me because it was true. By the time I reached this point, I was no longer just reporting outcomes. I was studying truth. Because when something defeats witchcraft consistently, year after year, across countries, across people who don't even know each other, you cannot call it coincidence. You have to call it law. And Psalms, when used at the beginning of a year, operate by law. Let me tell you the truth plainly. The routine that frustrated us the most was not complicated. It was simple, boring, consistent. That is why it worked. Here is the structure we saw again and again. The beginning of year psalm routine. Duration 21 days minimum, 30 days strong, 40 days very difficult to reverse. Timing morning before daily activity begins, midnight when possible. Structure morning 5 a.m. to 7 a.m. Psalm 1, Psalm 23, Psalm 24. Midnight 12 a.m. Psalm 91, Psalm 121, Psalm 124. They didn't rush. They didn't skip. They didn't replace it with noise. They read out loud, slowly, attentively. Some repeated verses that stood out. Some paused when a word pierced them, and something invisible but permanent formed. From our side, this is what happened. I'm about to explain what this routine did in the spirit. 1. The calendar was occupied early. Attacks, scheduled later, found no space. 2. Monitoring became difficult. Names appeared blurred or shielded. 3. Permissions expired before activation. Rituals failed without explanation. 4. Attacks returned as confusion. Covens argued, misfired, collapsed. This is why some people finished the year saying, I don't know what happened, but nothing worked against me. Something did happen. It happened in January. What if January has already passed? We used to hope believers would ask this because it meant they were late. But here is the truth we never wanted you to know. You can still establish a new spiritual season. Anytime you deliberately set aside 21 days, 30 days, or 40 days, and you read Psalms consistently, you create a new marker. January is powerful because it is collective, but personal seasons can still be created. However, this matters. Late alignment often means partial recovery, not full prevention. That is why early obedience always works better. How people lost what they built. Not many, but some did. And it always came down to one thing: neglect. They established something, then abandoned it completely. You see, some sons build, others maintain. People who at least return weekly to Psalm 91, Psalm 121, retained their covering. Those who stopped everything slowly became visible again. Witchcraft waits. The assignment that broke me. This is the part I rarely speak about. A woman, young, gentle, unsuspecting, was scheduled to die that year. Her name was Blessing Odom. She lived in Uyo, Akwa Ibom State. The plan was clean, no noise, no warning. But in January, after a church crossover service, she decided to read Psalms for 30 days. She didn't know why. She read Psalm 27, Psalm 91 every night. By March, when the assignment was triggered, it collapsed immediately. Instead of death, she received medical clarity. She escaped an accident. She entered a season of peace. The final report came back with words that shook me. Target inaccessible, yea, sealed. That night, I could not sleep because I realized something unbearable. People were being protected by words they barely understood, while we were destroying lives with full knowledge. That contradiction broke me. I left because witchcraft depends on ignorance. It thrives when people don't know that the beginning of seasons matter. Words establish laws. Consistency defeats power. Once people learn this, witchcraft loses its advantage. And I could no longer participate in a system that feared obedient readers of Psalms more than fasting crowds. Let me end with this. Do not wait until loss begins. Attacks escalate. Fear enters. To start doing what should have been done early. The people we couldn't defeat didn't fight harder. They started earlier. They shaped the year while it was still forming. If you remember nothing else, remember this. What you consistently declare at the beginning of a season becomes the argument the rest of the year must obey. That is the truth witchcraft never wanted you to hear.